Okay, good afternoon. My name is Susan Phillips. I am from the Lewis Stokes Cleveland VA and Case Western Reserve Francis Payne Bolton School of Nursing. And it's my pleasure to introduce Barb Tassel, who is the Administrative Director of ProMedica Center of Nursing Excellence in Toledo. And Barb is going to speak today about the integration of CUSIN into practice. Barb earned her BSN from the University of Toledo in 1982. She earned her MSN from Lourdes University in 2009. And Barb has worked in nursing education in the practice setting for over 23 years and has extensive experience in education planning, regulatory compliance, and program evaluation, including orientation, competency, and continuing education programs. Barb became aware of and has remained interested in CUSIN for the past 4 years and has a keen interest in the benefits CUSIN can provide in the practice environment. So, round of applause for Barb.
Hi there. I am so thrilled to see this many people interested in integrating CUSIN into practice. And it's a keen interest of mine. And I'm a little jealous for all of those of you who work in academia because you're way ahead of us on the curve. So what we're going to do today is kind of talk about our journey, ours meaning ProMedica in Northwest Ohio. And that journey, what I really want you to focus on is not necessarily our outcomes, because we're not far enough yet to have a whole lot of solid outcomes, but the process. Because I think as other folks in practice start to walk this walk, they're going to maybe benefit from knowing what some other folks have tried. So that's kind of the purpose of what we're doing here. CUSIN up to this point has made great strides in academia. It matured in academia. It was designed and defined for academia. It was really the heart of those who started it. The faculty in the academic settings have been introduced, and they have had focused education so that they knew how to use the material from the CUSIN competencies themselves and from the website. There's a lot of support there. It's been integrated and embedded into curriculum. And the one interesting thing when you talk to folks from academia is they always had an outcome. They had a single outcome in mind from academia. Anybody want to guess, especially from the undergrad level, what that was? NCLEX, right? Okay, not hard to figure out what your outcome there is. That's not really the way it is in the hospital acute care practice setting. We also knew that the NCLEX was going to be embedded into the regulatory NCLEX, and we knew that it was going to be in the accreditation standards. So those made that work of that faculty development fairly focused and fairly easy. There has not, however, up to this point, been very much formal work, effort, energy, focused education for those of us who work in the practice setting, that our educational drive is in the practice setting. So that term practice that we keep using, practice is, there are some seats over on this side if you still want to make your way around. Practice is a hard word to define. And by the way, I should have started on the first slide. There were 2 names on that slide. Chris Kofel is my colleague at ProMedica. She is actually upstairs doing a second presentation that's all related. I'll show you where that folds into this whole work. But I want to give her due credit because this is not just my work. This is both of our works. And Chris and I have spent hours, literally hours and hours, trying to define practice in a way that was meaningful to our work in CUSIN. And so everybody, every nurse feels passionate, and we all have an important part in that term practice. But for this work today, for this conversation, we really need to define what we mean by academia and practice. So academia, it's those of you that are focused on the achievement of a license or a degree. You can be included in an administrative role, a research role, and also the education, just the delivery of education. In the practice setting, however, I'd like for you to think of that as being focused on the delivery of nursing care. There's also research, education, and administration on the practice side. So with that definition, let me see a show of hands. How many of you would say you are primarily from academia? Yeah, that's kind of about what I anticipated. How about practice? Yes. All right. Super thrilled. All right. So those of you from practice, I'm super excited you're here, and I'm hoping you're going to take away some nuggets of some starting points. But those of you from academia, I really have a challenge to put in front of you. You all have practice partners back home. You all have folks in staff development that need to know what you know and they need to start this journey with you. And remember, they're behind you, so they're looking at you to guide. And I'm so excited that you're here and you're interested in this. So we're going to keep going here. I want you to understand where we are in practice, okay? Some of us in practice have not even yet heard of what CUSIN is. Depending on your relationship with a college, you might not even know that CUSIN is a term, is an acronym, even exists. Some of us, we can see the path. We can see that there's somewhere we need to go, but we really haven't started very far down that path yet. Some of us are tippy-toeing around. We're trying to explore the options. We're trying to figure out exactly what we should do with this CUSIN thing. That's about how we feel sometimes, this CUSIN thing. What do we do with this? We know it's important. We know we can't ignore it. But now what do I do with it? So we need a little help. We in practice need a unified approach. We don't have NCLEX as a goal. We don't have an accreditation body saying you need that. Okay? So we need to come up with a unified goal for us and where we're going. We need to be allowed enough variability in that outcome because we are very diverse at the end. We have home care and doctor's offices and acute care and long-term care and you name it. So we have to have variability in there, and we need to make sure that all the competencies that were designed and matured in academia will work for us. We have to try them out. It's not a magic mix. That's what we have found out so far. And we need to make sure that we are staying linked to academia. The worst thing that could happen right now is for us to go off on a path and make that practice theory gap even worse than it is. So by knowing your outcomes and what you've already experienced in academia, hopefully we can do this in a collaborative way to where we are actually lessening that practice theory gap. That would be our goal as Chris and I walk down this. So our hope at this point is not to be the sage on the stage because we don't know everything. I told you we haven't arrived at very many outcomes yet. But we do want to share our journey and our lessons learned. We think it's important. We have discovered a few things. We want to invite you to join us in the conversations. This cannot be about a few hospitals making some decisions. This has to be collectively us in practice. We have to know exactly what is and isn't going to work out of this and how do we apply it. And then we need to find a common path. So that's kind of the work that's laid out in front of practice. As I said, those of you in academia, you're further ahead than we are. But we can't accomplish all that, not in the next 90 minutes. That's a little bit of a multi-year plan that we need to do. So what are we going to do today for the next 85 minutes or so? We are going to look at describing the strategies that we have used in ProMedica to gain strategic support for integrating CUSIN. We have a hierarchical structure in practice, just like folks do in academia, and we have to get our administrators to approve this, to get on board with us. We want to identify some current uses that acute care is using for CUSIN. And then I'm going to ask you to collectively do some brain power with us to help create some methodologies, propose some methodologies that will actually help us take the first step for integrating CUSIN into our practice educational environment. Okay? So who are we? When I say we, meaning ProMedica in Northwest Ohio. I just wanted to give you a little bit about where we're working so you understand the framework that we're coming from. ProMedica is an integrated health system. We have 12 hospitals in Northwest Ohio and Southeast Michigan. We have everything from a tertiary, children's, critical access, community hospitals. We've got the whole gamut of them. We cover the 2 states. We cover 27 counties. There are over 300 locations. Most of them have nursing in some way, shape, or form within them. About 14,000 employees and about 6,000 of them are nurses. So it's not a small area, but it definitely is not something like the United States practice definitions that we're hoping to get some of that unified approach going. So where did we start? How did we find out about CUSIN, we meaning ProMedica? We were part of the TTP study. How many of you have heard of the TTP study, the Transition to Practice study? Just a very few of you, okay. 3 states were chosen. Ohio was one of them. We had 6 hospitals within the state of Ohio that were all in the implementation intervention phase of this National Council State Board of Nursing study. And it was looking at the transition from the new grad into practice and kind of a para-residency model, some educational focused models is what this study was about. CUSIN is at the heart of those modules. So CUSIN was introduced to us through our participation in this research study. We had over 300 new grads in those 6 hospitals in the active stage of this research study. And for those 300 active grads, we had about 130 preceptors who also took the CUSIN modules. So we had about 460 total people in ProMedica that became exposed to. I won't say thoroughly knowledgeable of, because it's a very big topic, but they became exposed to the CUSIN model through this research study. Next, we had the opportunity to get engaged with Lord's University as part of a 3-year grant project, a NEPCURE grant through HRSA. And with that, they were engaging in putting CUSIN into their curriculum at the same time they were moving to concept-based curriculum. And so we engaged as a subcontractor in that grant with them. We learned a lot, and we hope they learned a little bit from us. What did it benefit us? Well, we got exposed to CUSIN. Okay? We had seen it. We had gone, yeah, there's that CUSIN thing in the TTP, but we didn't really understand it. Okay? Through this 3-year relationship under this grant, we've really come to better understand CUSIN and understand the power behind it. We knew that CUSIN would be in the NCLEX. We knew it was going to be in the accreditation model. And we have a lot of schools of nursing in Northwest Ohio. So we kind of went, wow, if that many of our new grads are getting exposed to it, as this thing starts to become part of the regulatory base for academia, once they graduate, then what? Then they're going to come to us, and they're going to speak a language we don't speak. And they're going to have thoughts that we don't know. And so we kind of went, we have to start paying attention. This must be something more important than just the TTP study model. This must be bigger than what we were thinking. So what did we offer to the university through this relationship? And this is actually, these 2 slides are actually what Chris Kofel, who was the partner in this, is upstairs with the dean from the Lord's University presenting right now. That's why her name's in both places. So as this relationship continued, we had the opportunity to help them, the university, apply CUSIN in the clinical setting. We were that inside voice, that explaining person for the inside of the clinical setting. We did a lot of staff and leadership education on CUSIN and the competency-based or concept-based curriculum that Lord's was going to. We also provided, Chris also provided a lot of faculty education about the initiatives going on in the practice setting, because we still have to make them work in both directions. We can't have this void in between them. It opened a lot of communication lines. There was a lot of exposure on both sides to what the other side of the world looks like. Lots of frequent rounding. And Chris had an opportunity to create a lot of tools based on CUSIN. Scavenger hunts, evaluations, student evaluations, lots of those things, and they were all based in CUSIN. So it was a great opportunity. The one thing that I didn't put on the slide, we didn't think about it until later, one of the lessons learned out of this relationship was that we, in practice, had to get a little more transparent before we would allow our colleagues in academia to see our quality issues. We had to kind of go, oh, we going to let them know that about us? Ooh, that was kind of a hard message. We had to think long and hard about what does this mean? What does quality improvement mean? Who should be involved in quality improvement? And what does that transparency need to look like? We had a lot of leadership conversations around those things. So once we were kind of moving in that direction, and we went, well, okay, so our grads are going to come out speaking this language and knowing these things, and we're not ready for this. So now what do we do next? Well, through that relationship, Chris had an opportunity to shadow the CNOs from the 2 hospitals. Out of our hospitals, we had 2 that were part of this grant. It's expanded to 4 or 5 now after the 3 years of our hospitals are in this grant, but initially she started with 2. She had a lot of chance to talk to them. There was a lot of one-to-one with unit leadership. Throughout all of that, Chris really identified a language variance. CUSIN and the language spoken in practice were not the same language. They were the same words, but they didn't have the same meaning. And so she actually created a crosswalk. This is a sample of it. She actually created a crosswalk that has the CUSIN definitions on it. And then it has this column, or this row has in practice, our responses to what we thought would match that. Now, those are only the domain definitions. Those aren't all the KSAs underneath them. But we had a bunch of councils. We do quality. We have dashboards everywhere. Of course, we're safety focused. Of course, we're quality focused. But our words had different meanings than how CUSIN uses those words. And so this was an important activity for us to walk through with several members of our leadership groups, so they could help see that there is a language difference between how we say it and how the students are learning it. We just can't assume that the students are going to translate that language. That work continued, but it rapidly evolved to where we thought we were ready to start playing with CUSIN internally. We were ready to start really trying to understand what we should do with CUSIN internally. It was right about that time, in late 2011, that we had the opportunity to open the Center of Nursing Excellence. In that, we centralized, for all of our metro hospitals, we centralized our orientation. And when we were re-looking at how to take 5, 6 different hospitals' orientation and put them into one framework, they were all like, mine's best, mine's best. Those territorial kind of things that it's just natural. You build it, you want it, you want to protect it. And so we decided to actually build the new one on a CUSIN foundation. Now, the main thing I want you to understand is the only thing right now that we were savvy enough with in CUSIN was the domain definitions. We weren't looking at all the KSAs yet. We were really only trying to understand the language of the 6 different domains and the definitions underneath them. So we were in baby steps. We were really early in how should we use those. But we designed a crosswalk. And what we did is taking those definitions, we took all the content that we want a new nurse, started with nurses, took all the content that we wanted them to get from their first day with us through the end of their unit-based orientation. These are all the things that we throw at a new nurse to learn. And we wanted to see where they divided up in the CUSIN domains. And it was a nice exercise. It taught us a lot, and it showed us where we needed to beef up a few things and where we had tons in certain areas. We didn't change any of those tons. We left them there because we didn't really understand CUSIN yet, and we felt passionate that they needed all that stuff on safety, because that's where it was very, very heavy. Okay. But again, we're only at this point in our journey working with the domains. It's really all we're working with are those larger statements. So some of our other earlier experiences. We were building a system-wide, and that's a little bit of a falsehood. It was really only Metro Toledo, about 6 hospitals, a residency program. We built it on a relationship model, and at that point we had the same opportunity. We said, well, let's build this on a lot of the CUSIN stuff. Let's make sure we use that. A couple of our educators that moved into that team had been preceptors in the TTP study, so they felt very comfortable with that CUSIN model that they'd used in that study. And we really thought we had already CUSINized our residency curriculum. We weren't quite there yet, but we didn't know it at that point. We thought we had a very solid CUSIN foundation. In fact, we have 3 rotations in our residency, 3 main areas of focus, and we built those on quality, safety, and customer experience, which would pretty closely match our thoughts then was that was patient-centered. Those were our thoughts then. We've grown. We've learned a lot. We've expanded our journey. So I just want to show you a couple of the tools that we started with. They're still in use. They've grown a lot. They're more mature now. But our first rotation in this residency is 7 weeks, and the focus is pure safety. We don't even put them on their real unit yet. We put them on a different unit because we want them to figure out what it's like to be a nurse, what it's like to think safety when you're doing medication administration and talking to a doctor. We don't want them looking at their patient population, their patient-specific things yet. We want them to focus on this is what a nurse does, not this is what a nurse of an orthopedic patient does. So this is an example of the weekly goals is at the top half of this. So every week, and sometimes it's a double week, 2-week goals together. And this one is focused at safety. Within the medication administration is what this goal is. So I know you can't read those goals, but the 3 goals on this page say identify patient safety risks and implement interventions to prevent harm. That's not CUSIN language. That was our words underneath that domain. So we're not using the KSAs yet at this point. We're just still focused at where does our stuff fit in these domains. We weren't thinking about changing our stuff yet. It was just trying to make it fit. We were trying to take our stuff and put it in this luggage container called CUSIN. That's about where we were at. Okay? We have another tool that the preceptors use then to evaluate those goal statements every week. And the preceptor can rate folks from 1 to 3. 1 not meeting, 3 meeting beautifully. And it's just a way to track progress. Nothing earth-shattering in any of those. We also have a tool that we use in about 3 different ways across that 1 or 2 week learning period. This is an SBAR form. Here's a bigger copy of it. It's used initially in the clinical setting. So the resident would take one of their patients for that day and write that patient up as a case study. Just a typical patient they're caring for or a challenging patient they're caring for, if it's a new diagnosis or something for them. Then there are questions that are presented to the resident, and they have to answer those questions. And we're trying to put some CUSIN stuff into those questions, but it's a trying, and it's not using the full KSAs yet at this point. And then the final way that this tool is used is they take this to a reflective learning session, And they also use that same case study in some other things. So they're actually reflecting back on this case study, and we're using this as a threading design, so part of the concept-based stuff. But we're just, again, we're still playing with it at the domain level, not the KSA level. I think this is an area that we really are going to see some changes in the near future. So we started to notice through all of these types of work that we couldn't make things fit. CUSIN works well in undergrad development, and the graduate level works well, but when you try to put them in the middle to the competent nurse or that nurse who's achieved NCLEX and we need to make them grow, undergrads are meant for NCLEX. That was your out point, right? That was your outcome point you needed. We pick up from there. Now where do we drive them to when the KSAs are back at that point? So we're finding that we're struggling a little bit. Some of them fit, some of them don't. The domains are great. There's a language difference, but the domains are great. We can work with the domains. It's when you get down into the KSAs, we're starting to go, I'm not real sure how to do this. I'm not real sure what to do with this. So what we have found, especially from our preceptors' feedback, is that the KSAs don't have enough as evidenced by. There's not enough measurement within them for a preceptor to say, she's got it, he's got it, she doesn't have it. They're asking us, so what would that look like if they did that? What would I see? So it's that measurement that we're kind of going, oh, okay, we got to work on this. We got to think about this. A couple of examples of that. Value seeing healthcare situations through the patient's eyes. How do you measure value? It's very difficult. Well, one preceptor may measure it in a completely different way than another. I can value something and not have any outward evidence of it. Value is an internal element. You can see if I value something, but you can't see if I don't value it very easily. So, and you don't always see when I value something. Now, when we started to look at the graduate, we also found that some of those fit perfectly and some don't. They were built for leadership and advanced practice, right? They're perfect for that. So when we've got somebody going back to school, not a problem. Those work great. But again, bring it back down into the practicing nurse, that new nurse for the next 5 years of that person's growth, the nurse that's been at the bedside 10 years. What do we do with those? And so we have found actually that the graduate competencies, the graduate KSAs, are a little closer to what we need, but there's still even some places there that we are struggling with. So some of them do fit, things like act with integrity, consistency, respect for differing views. Straight out of CUSIN KSA, it works beautifully. They're not all quite that easy to see. So what we found out is that if we look at the verbs, and if we change some of the verbs, both in some of the undergrad and some of the grad statements, we find the terminology more usable. That's just kind of where we've started. I'm not proposing that as outcome yet. I'm saying that's where we have started our thought processes. So things like analyze difference in communication styles and preferences. Okay, patient-centered care, KSA. But do most bedside nurses have time, effort, energy, and focus, and what do they do with an analysis? That's not, they're practicing, right? They need the bedside, they need that. So maybe something like accept, tolerate, or acknowledge differences. It's just a change in the verb. Might work, might not. So we're at a lot of questioning stages in our journey right now. I like the next one. I like the next one because I'm an administrator and because I've completed my master's, okay? Analyze the impact of context, such as access, cost, et cetera, on improvement efforts. I would be here to tell you that most of our caregiving nurses need to define and understand those concepts before they can analyze them. Those concepts, the context, the access to care, all of those things aren't in the forefront of most practicing nurses' brains. Their leadership and advanced practice nurses use those. Those are skills we use, but not the practicing nurse at the bedside, most of them. So just some places that we have to think about. A lot of questions. So a year ago, we were already at this point by the time that last year's CUSIN conference was in Atlanta. This was one of the pieces off a poster presentation that we presented at that time. And so down here, you have the undergrad, and up here you have the graduate competencies, and the stuff in the middle is the stuff we're kind of going, I'm not real sure how to make it fit. It doesn't quite exactly work. So we were proposing that question last year, and if you think about it, Benner's novice to expert model, here's the novice, Here's the expert. What do we do with the competent, which is what that nurse that's been out there for 5 to 10 years, that's where they're at. And so it kind of matches no matter which way you want to think about this journey that we're on. So what do we do with this gap? What does this mean to us? Should we, in practice, not engage in CUSIN because we are having a hard time making it fit? Should we just leave it alone and let you in academia have fun with it? I don't like that answer, but it's a legitimate question. Okay. Should CUSIN have a third set of competencies? We have undergrad, we have grad. Should we have that for the practicing competent level? It's a possibility. Or is this gap really evidence that our practicing nurses need to be raised, that their practicing level needs to be raised up to that graduate level? I don't know. None of the three of those have easy answers, but we believe, as educators in the practice setting, we believe that those questions are worth asking and trying to find an answer to. And it's this that we believe is the journey ahead of practice, that we have to figure out what do we do with those questions. So we started talking a lot. One of the first people that we had the pleasure of talking to was Mary Delansky, who's the director of the CUSIN Institute over in Cleveland Case. She encouraged us. She helped us connect with a few other people to talk with. One of those was Jane Barnsteiner, who is a consultant on the grant with the Lord's University. So we had a chance to run some of these ideas and thoughts by her. They both encouraged us to keep going. They said, yeah, you're in the right direction. You keep moving, keep going. The questions are accurate questions. The answers need to be found. We need to have that. And then we had the opportunity to link into some of our state nursing leadership through the Ohio Organization of Nurse Executives. We met the person at a conference there in Ohio. We met the person who had written the white paper that OONE put out. And the white paper was basically stating that, part in yellow here states that CUSIN should be the framework for practice, research, and education. Now we go back to what's the definition of practice there, because we could have hours and hours and hours of conversation related to that, but we took it at what it means to us. We said, yes, we're in this white paper. Let's take that for all it's worth. And we did, with OONE's support. So those three levels of national and state leadership really encouraged us to continue going, to keep asking the question. So we came up with a proposal. We proposed that we would collaborate with the CUSIN Institute and other acute care systems in Ohio to investigate how to use CUSIN competencies as a structure for educational design in the practice setting. We wanted to make sure that we were embedding and integrating CUSIN within all of our education as we learned and grew with this thing called CUSIN. We really want to get some grant funding. We're a little jealous of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's money that academia got. We're feeling like we need a little bit of funding to help us with this journey and keep going. And then we also believe that this has to be, whatever those answers to those three questions are, it has to be researched, it has to be vetted. We want to turn it into evidence-based practice. And then it needs to be published and shared. That's kind of our proposal. Right about that same time, we started trying to figure out how do we make this CUSIN thing applicable across an acute care setting and applicable across 12 hospitals in an acute care setting, plus all the non-acute areas that we have. When we looked at the bedside nurse, what we didn't want it to be was another flavor of the month, another thing that was being tried on them, another something that they had to react to and respond to, or, So we said, no, wait a minute. CUSIN is not an action model. CUSIN is a framework to build on. And so as a framework, could it be used as a filter model? So the top, you have all the stuff that comes at us, all the regulatory and all the new everything that comes at healthcare. And it has to be filtered through ProMedica, and we have our core values. So by the time it gets through that level, there's still a lot of stuff hitting the bedside staff all the time. So we said, what if we could take CUSIN, and when something came and they would say, oh, this is an informatics competency, I have to learn how to navigate this new EMR because that's part of my informatics competency as a nurse. And this is something I have to learn about how to look at that new dashboard because that's part of my quality improvement competency as a bedside nurse. So we said, if we took CUSIN and tried to divide everything coming at them into those, they would at least have a place to link it to in their world. And we could start building these bigger buckets. In CUSIN, those are called KSAs. In our world, well, they were called buckets because we didn't have a lot of foundation in those worlds yet. Had a lot of language, but not all that meant the same thing. So we just kind of came up with the schematic to play around with it. We haven't really done a whole lot with it other than it made sense when we were talking at the time. And it helped our internal conversations it helped them see some usefulness to their world. And because, remember, some people don't even know what CUSIN is until folks start talking about it. So that's really, we used it almost as an introduction strategy. So within ProMedica, we started having some conversations. We have 12 hospitals. At that point in time, we had 12 CNOs. Okay? So we met with them as a group. We walked them through CUSIN, what it could do, what it should do, what it can't do, what we didn't know about. And they said, move forward. It sounds logical. Why wouldn't we? Let's go. Okay? That was really good. Center of Nursing Excellence has an advisory board that meets, that is off of the main board for ProMedica. And on that advisory board, we have academic partners. We have clinical practitioners. We have members of senior leadership. So we made this proposal to them. And they said, yay, go. Keep going. Keep marching. You're on the right path. Keep going. In fact, some of our academic partners that are on that board said, and let's make sure to get you linked in with the Ohio Action Coalition. Okay, from the state, and then Ohio has now received a SIP grant. So we've made some of those connectivities. And then we made the final proposal to the president of acute care. At that point, he was the president of 3 of the hospitals, and he now is the president over all 12 hospitals, and he gave us full support, full endorsement of moving forward. As a point in process, if you're from a hospital setting, you can't ignore that part. If you don't get your internal leadership engaged in what you're doing, you're batting your head against a brick wall every time you try to take the next step. Because you really have to have them to say yes, and everybody else then kind of looks at what you're doing and says, oh, well, that might work. Let's see how we can make that work. Their endorsement is huge. It was huge for us. In fact, that endorsement has been so strong and held, and those proposals were made about a year ago, some just before the CUSIN conference last year and some right after. That support has remained so strong that our CNOs put together a newspaper article every Nurses Week and put in our local paper. And it was about CUSIN and the safety focus that we're doing with the nurses. They believe in it so much that they wanted the community members in Northwest Ohio to know what ProMedica is doing to further safety with the nurses at the bedside. I thought that was a pretty cool endorsement, put out there for the world. So we kept talking. We had more conversations. A lot of our work over the last 2 years has been conversations and networking, a lot of it. I'm going to get down to some hardcore work, but a lot of it has been that. So we were at the National CUSIN conference last year with a poster presentation. We took that same poster to our Ohio League of Nursing, our OLN conference there in the state of Ohio. It wasn't so much that we did the poster presentation. That was cool all in itself, but those brought opportunities for more conversations. We networked with people who were there. When they stopped in front of the poster, we tried to engage them in, what do you think? Does this make sense to you? Are we on the right path? And so we learned a lot, and we tweaked as we went throughout all those conversations. Locally, we have participated with Lords through this grant now in 2 different conferences. The one last year we took the same poster to. Actually, in 2012, Jane Barnsteiner was at that conference. Again, we had the opportunity to have some conversation with her. And in 2013, Joanne Dish and Lisa Day were both at that conference that Lord's University sponsored. And so, again, we had the opportunity to bounce our ideas off of some of the best thinking brains in CUSIN to say, are we moving in the right direction? Do you see this as the next step that CUSIN needs to go to? Or are we butting our head against a wall somewhere? And throughout all of those conversations, everyone echoed the same thing. Yes, it makes perfectly logical sense. You're on the right track. Keep going. We had a lot of encouragement. We weren't sure where we were going yet, but we kept walking. We kept having the conversations and just finding out where we were heading. And an interesting thing came to light. We pretty much found that we had a juxtaposed position going on. Okay? Administration readily approved it. Why? Why do you think they did? Well, it matched all their initiatives. They are being asked to fix safety and quality and patient satisfaction scores, right? Everything CUSIN says is the same thing that they're being held accountable for. So they said, go, we're with you, fix it, do it. Okay? Perfectly logical sense. Who would argue with a link back to IOM, right? Who's going to argue with that? Not leadership. Okay? But then we had a bunch of practice educators. Chris and I are only 2. We've got 12 hospitals and a lot of non-acute care areas, so we have a large group of educators that we work with across the system. And for many of them, this was too theoretical. That's academics. That's for those folks in college. Don't try to bring that into us. That's not what we do. Some understood and appreciated CUSIN, but they didn't have time to dig in. It was too big for them. Do you want me to read how many pages of what and go through KSA who? They were like, that's okay. Just tell us what you want us to do, Barb. Just tell us, Chris. Just come. We'll give you 20 minutes and tell us what you need us to do. 20 minutes. That's what we got. Okay? So administration saying, go, go, go. Educators said, not my direction, please. Okay? And then you've got the bedside nurse who says, we're already doing it. Do you know how many safety initiatives we have? I got dashboards that line a wall. What do you want to teach me about quality improvement? So then we get into that language variance where they can't even figure out why we're talking to them. They don't see any of the gap that CUSIN provides for us. So we kind of looked at that and went, wow. So now what do we do? How do you get over this one? Well, it felt a little cumbersome. It sometimes does feel a little cumbersome, like we're dragging something really massive with us. But we've been encouraged to keep walking, and so we're going to try to keep walking. We decided not to try to walk underneath an elephant, but, the picture still spoke to us a lot about how we felt. So we found ourselves kind of we had to do something with this juxtaposed position. So because of our work with the Center of Nursing Excellence, we have educators who work directly there for us. And I put a challenge out to those educators. And there are about 11 or 12 that were given this challenge. They each have different responsibilities in different parts of curriculum, some for residency, some for orientation, some for continuing education. We kind of have the whole gamut. I said, I just need you to start. This is not something you're going to do in 20 minutes, and I can't fix it for you in 20 minutes. I just want you to start. Pick one part of your curriculum. You can pick the smallest part of your curriculum you want. Pick one part of your curriculum and go to CUSIN and see what you can do. See if that one part, if CUSIN will help. See if CUSIN doesn't even apply. We wanted to hear the it doesn't work as much as we wanted to hear the yay, it works. We need to understand both sides of that coin. So we put that challenge out to the educators. It was interesting. It was interesting. Let me tell you the story of what happened. So we run a marathon, a competency blitz across our acute care hospitals. And so they found that there were some of the KSAs that they were actually covering, maybe not in all those same words, but the language variance wasn't too hard there. They were actually doing things around role member within a code team and who does what within the code team and clarifying those roles and responsibilities at a mock code. Cool, excellent. CUSIN's in there. We're making progress. We had an alarm fatigue poster, and that alarm fatigue poster dealt a lot with the benefits and limitations of built-in safety things like alarms. Okay? And it helped them to appreciate the physical limitations of human performance. So there were some more. That's like, okay, well, maybe this isn't so far away from us. This is cool. We've got two KSAs out of how many hundred that there are, right? We found two. When we got to our O2 therapy and our CPAP BiPAP station for the marathons, we thought, well, okay, this is really a good way to talk about interprofessional teams because we include the respiratory role and the physician role and the student role and all those in there. So that one, okay, we could do that. It's just a picture of the alarm fatigue. It was a cute idea that one of our educators in the hospitals came up with. We ordered fortune cookies, and we put alarm fatigue strategies in the fortune cookies. So when they read the poster, they got a cookie, and they got a little reminder afterwards, and it was just a cute little attraction thing. But in that, we talked to them about how to customize alarm limits. So that's patient-centered. It's also safety. We told them never turn off the alarms, safety drive. And we also had informatics in there because of the data that comes off of alarms and how it feeds into the EMR system and into the data quality dashboards. So we had an opportunity to feed 3 different KSAs, 3 different domains into that one single poster. As we had the educators start to work with this challenge that we'd given them, they developed, without any guidance from us, they kind of fell into the same pattern. Now, some of them were connecting with each other. Some of them were having conversations throughout those couple of 3 weeks that we kind of said, here, by next month, I just want to know where you're heading. So they spent about 2 or 3 weeks commiserating with each other on mini days, trying to figure out. And so there was some intercommunication between them, but there was no instruction on this. And what they came up with was the process is they first started by crosswalking their current objectives to the domains. Remember when I showed you the crosswalks earlier? It's all about the domains. Well, that's where they naturally started also. Then they tried to figure out which KSAs were already included at some level, maybe not fully, but at some way, shape, or form, they thought, oh, that's related. Okay, I'm going to claim that one. That one works. I'm going to get that. And then they also took the next step to figure out what parts of CUSIN aren't in our curriculum, and do they need to be in that curriculum. So they looked for what was missing from the KSAs. And they all came to the same point. We need to do more. We need to analyze this deeper. It's not something we can do in 20 minutes. It's really what they all kind of came back to. So another piece of curriculum that was analyzed in that process was our basic EKG interpretation curriculum. Now, that instructor says, we already talk about human factors and basic design, safety design. We talk about alarms again and the technologies behind that. And we also talk about communication and handoff and transitions across care. So she felt pretty comfortable that she had part of it. Remember, I only asked them to take one small part. One little piece of your curriculum and start. Take the baby step. That's really all they were asked to do. Well, we have a couple of pieces of curriculum that are not nursing, but those folks live in the nursing world, and so that instructor didn't want left out. She said, I'm going to do it too. I may not work with nurses, but we're going to do it too. So our unit curriculum, there were things in there that they already had, value seeing through the patient's eyes. So, there's a lot that you might think of in academia as your basic nursing courses that we provide in the hospital setting to our unlicensed support staff. What they found was missing out of here, one of their first aha moments that was missing that they thought was really important and they should add from a safety perspective was authority gradients and teamwork and its impact on patient safety. They weren't helping their folks. They taught them the chain of command, but they didn't teach them the intrinsic danger issues in that authority gradient and chain of command. So another one was the nursing tech curriculum, and between these two curriculums, it's very interesting because CUSIN has an N on the end of it, right? And that stands for nursing. And in an academic setting, I know many of you have some form of interdisciplinary or interprofessional education, but your curriculums are about nursing, right? Our curriculums aren't. Nurses don't function alone. Nurses are never alone. Nursing is not it in acute care. So whatever we do, we have to be able to apply it across disciplines. And so I don't know what we're going to do with QSEN when we try to do that. That's another question point that we get to when we're trying to apply these principles in practice. You can't do something to only nursing. Okay? So we decided to try to do this with the nursing tech curriculum, and we found more missing there. We found that curriculum needed beefed up in several ways. By the way, diversity, the patient-centered KSAs around diversity, they were missing, not missing, that's probably too harsh. They were underdeveloped across most of our curriculums. We kind of gave them some splash, but we really didn't dive into what that means for the patient. We also need to make sure that we're using active involvement of the patients and families. We need to teach that to our techs, and that there are barriers to getting the patients involved, and what are those barriers and how do we overcome those. So those were things that instructor said, well, I found some stuff in CUSIN I have, but these are things I don't have and I think I need to have. So that was an eye-opener for us, and that's really all we wanted. We just wanted people to start the conversations. So the next place I want to talk to you about is what I think is an absolute joy out of this whole thing, and that's our nursing residency and what has happened to that. So again, I told you that we built our nursing residency 2 years prior to this on a CUSIN foundation, right? We played with the domains. We kind of had some of those verbish things thrown in there. And so when I gave this little challenge out, my 5 educators that work on the CUSIN, they really thought they had it. And so they thought they were going to just do this in an afternoon. They thought they're just going to go through and do this in an afternoon. About 2 hours in, they came and got Chris and I, who happened to be in a meeting at that point, and said, okay, we're confused. Tell us again what we're supposed to be doing. And by the way, what format do you want it in when we're done? Because we're convinced it's in there. We just don't know what format you want to see it in. They still were convinced that the curriculum for anything from an 18 to a 40-week residency was already CUSINized. They really just wanted to know what format did I want the report in. That's kind of where they were coming back. So we kind of retooled, told them let's think a little smaller. Let's go back to that goal page. Let's just look at your goals and make sure that when you compare your goals to the CUSIN language, is there anything we can take from CUSIN language to augment that goal? Is there anything that you can modify just related to the goals page? Forget the rest of it. Forget everything else. Just let's look at the goals page as a place to start. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall with what happened out of this. they started working, and they dug in to all of their volumes of curriculum and activities that they go through. We run a residency track for everything except OR at this point. Med-surg, intermediate crit care, OB, peds, psych, we have them all. Anywhere from 18 to 40 weeks length of time. There's a lot of curriculum. And so they started tearing apart that curriculum and every activity within that curriculum. And they literally cut it apart and put it on a color-coded sticky note based on the domains that they thought it fit into. They wound up with quite a lot of sticky stuff on the walls of our conference room. They really did. It was a tremendous thing to watch. And I keep telling them the process is what they need to capture. The endpoint is great. I'm going to share a few pieces of the endpoint with you. The endpoint is phenomenal. But what they learned and the changes in their thinking, their paradigm shifts through this work, that's what we have to capture. And I'm really after them to get that published because they have learned so much more than I ever dreamed that they would learn out of that one little, please get started somewhere with this thing called CUSIN. Okay? So the front, they literally took scissors and cut apart every goal statement and every simulation event and every preceptor checking off something and every reflective learning. And they color-coded them according to the 6 domains. And they made notes on the back. This KSA is missing. We've got to have this one in here. This is met by that one. I mean, they spent hours. There were 5 people involved in this. They spent well over 40 hours together in a conference room over about a 3 or 4 week period. So well over 200 hours of educator time was invested in step 1 of using CUSIN in the practice domain. Most of their work was done by roundtable, and it wasn't all 5 of them always. It might have been 3 that could meet that afternoon and another 3 another afternoon. They did a lot of roundtable and generally vetting ideas against each other and challenging each other. And they really got a little frustrated when they were only dealing with the graduate or the undergraduate level competencies, because remember, their job as resident educators is to take them past NCLEX. That's the whole goal. But they were getting a little frustrated, and they didn't really understand what those competencies were supposed to offer them, what those KSAs. But then they pulled out the graduate, and they almost used the graduate level competencies as a commentary on the undergrad. It really helped them understand what the undergrad competency statements meant, so they could then kind of figure out, so now where would I have this person 6 months in, or 40 weeks in or something. They did a lot of detail work, and what they tell me is that they found the value in doing that level of detail. The preceptors for both our academic students coming in and our residencies, every time you talk to them about CUSIN, they always want to go back to that measurement, and that's where the educators found that they couldn't find the right level of detail also. So it was again confirmed that that measurement as evidenced by is one of the spots that we have to tweak the most when we try to apply this. It was interesting, as Chris and I listened to the debrief, it took them about 2 hours to debrief that 40 hours of work for us, so we couldn't be flies on the wall, but we wanted to so badly, so they spent a couple of hours telling us what their process was. And as we listened to them, they went through the 5 stages of change. They did the pre-contemplation, no intent to change whatsoever. We have it, what do you mean? What format should I tell you that we have it in? That was kind of their first afternoon. Then they went through contemplation. They were aware, but they couldn't make commitment. Okay, so this thing must have something to do with it, but I don't know how I'm going to use it yet. They went through that stage. Then they went through preparation with intention and behavioral change of small steps. They're in action right now. That's where they're at. They're in the action stage where they're modifying their behavior. They see what they need to do. They can see where they need to change more. And then they also have plans for the 5th stage already, which is maintenance. How do we keep this going, and what else do we need to do to make sure it stays current? So it's pretty cool, again, without guidance, without anybody telling them these, and they're all masters prepared, so they're awesome educators, an amazing set of educators. But they actually displayed to us, without them even knowing it, that they'd gone through all those stages of change. When I asked them, what's the next 3 things related to CUSIN that you feel you need to do? What would be your top 3, the priorities? They said, we have to analyze more. We know there's some changes needed, but we're not quite sure yet. Remember that you've got 20 minutes to tell us all about CUSIN, and they've engaged in over 40 hours individually, times 5 of them, and they still are like, we're not quite sure enough yet. We know we got to make changes, but we need to analyze more. We need to figure out more. The CUSIN language, they want to use some of the CUSIN language to modify the goals. Now, their first reaction as a process piece, their first reaction was, we're going to lose too much in our goals by moving to this CUSIN language. It's not specific enough. At the end of this exercise, now what they're saying is we want to use the CUSIN language as our goals and use our goals that we've been using as evidenced by. So they want to pull the CUSIN goal higher and use their task and safety focused goals as this is how they meet that goal. So I thought that was a really keen insight for them to come up with, that that's what they wanted to do. And then they also want to evaluate the content and their learning process because they believe they can share that. They believe that there's some opportunities for publishing. They believe that we have an opportunity to share our residency model. Whether that's somebody coming to us for residency experience or us sharing our residency model in one way, shape, or form, we're not sure. But they believe that they could be sharing that. So a couple of conclusion slides. Things that they found that CUSIN had that we didn't have fully developed in the residency already. Big one, cultural diversity needs more info in it. Quality improvement and evidence-based practice. And there's elements that we have, but there's some elements of each of those that we don't have. And then they found some things that we have in residency that they believe wholeheartedly has to stay as part of the residency maturation process. But CUSIN doesn't directly deal with it. So like timeliness, prioritization of care, especially when you start having 4 or 5 patients, that prioritization, critical thinking element. Patient load management, those types of things. Skill performance. We can put skill performance under the safety aspect of CUSIN. That's where most of it is. But sometimes it's so much more broadly held than just the safety element of it. So we're not real sure how to make that fit in this whole thing. Under patient-centered, it deals with patient education, but it doesn't deal with it quite to the depth or the breadth that we have it in residency as a learning aspect of it. So it's your outcome is our starting point. So it works for you as an outcome, but then when we need to broaden it, we're struggling with broadening your endpoint on those competencies. And then critical thinking for safe care, and the development of clinical reasoning and critical thought. I think that the original authors of CUSIN would say it's all in there. It's everything gives you that. That's probably true, but it's real hard to put it all in there in a residency program. So we're trying to figure out what do we do with that. So we've already talked a little bit about this slide. What do they want to do? Well, they are prioritizing some steps. They, with some strong encouragement from Chris and I, are actively looking at how to publish some of their work. They want to provide education for others, and they know it'll take more than 20 minutes now. So they're looking at some modalities, some webinars, some different types of conferences locally and stuff that we can present this. I think that's really awesome that we're going to have the opportunity to reap some benefit from the 200 hours of labor that they put into the starts of this. Some of the insights throughout all of these curriculum, not just the residency, before I go to that slide, I want to show you a couple of the tools that they came away with. This is an intermediate binder from the residency program, and if I open it, it's color-coded by domain. So they took all of their sticky notes and they color-coded everything in their curriculum, whether it's preceptor notes or whatever, all these tabs and stuff, and they're all color-coded. So if you want to see where something is in the domain, where some of the KSAs, what's in there, what's not, they have color-coded everything in here in those same sticky notes. Yes, they're a little bit type A. They wanted to make sure that everything was covered, and we wouldn't give them a format, so they created an awesome format. They then took all of the goals of the residency, and they took the KSAs across this way, and they have identified what KSA belongs under what aspect of the residency for all 6 domains. Some they're not sure they fit, but if they fit, this is where they would fit. What belongs in a residency and what doesn't, what belongs as part of core orientation versus a residency. What do you need to let the person do by the time they're a 2-year practitioner instead of trying to squeeze it all into the first 35 weeks or something? So those questions have yet to be answered. But these are some of the tools that team came up with as a result of all of that work. So they do have a lot of information they can share. But out of the whole set of team members, what are some of the insights that we've taken away from this whole set of work? Well, we started out with the wrong definition of what it means to CUSINize. It is not about squeezing CUSIN into our luggage. It is really trying to tear it all apart and see how it all fits back into a new piece of luggage is kind of what we're thinking. They really wanted to make sure that every piece of CUSIN and every piece of curriculum, and I'm going to squeeze it all into my 4 days with these people. I'm going to teach them every piece of every domain in the 4 days I have in front of me. That was kind of the definition that they started with. So again, a whole lot of learning going on. They also gave a lot of insight to, I thought I knew CUSIN because I was one of those TTP preceptors, remember? I really thought I knew CUSIN, or I teach for the college that's using CUSIN. I'm one of those clinical instructors that's been taught. But until they dug into this level, they didn't understand that they didn't understand CUSIN. And most of them would tell you, we have had a full paradigm shift. We have had an absolute change in our perspective. So I quickly want to tell you about another project that's going on. Remember I told you that the N doesn't live alone in practice setting? So we are in the midst right now of bringing on a new integrated employee management system from HR, everything from hiring through retirement. We'll manage the person, and part of that is a new employee eval tool, an online employee eval tool. And so what do we do with that? Well, remember back to the administrative support that we had? We said if we're going to have a new employee eval tool, we want CUSIN in it. Well, now that brings on a whole new bucket of worms, okay? Because now we're not just talking nursing. Now if we do it, we have to do it to all employees. So the first thing that we had to do was figure out if it fit, because we are an integrated health system, and that means that our employees in docs offices have to get the same eval tool that nurses on the floors do, that environmental services in the OR suites do, everybody. So we used a continuum. Acute care was pretty easy. Really, it was the easier of them. The second one is our continuum services with long-term care, home care, rehabs, all of those fit into that continuum. Third column over is our insurance company. Okay? We wanted them engaged also. We wanted the case managers from the insurance in this. And then the last column over there are the system departments. So infection control and finance and the Center of Nursing Excellence and all of us that sit at a system level, not really in the acute care. Was this CUSIN thing going to work? That was the question that we were asking of this team. By the time we got done with lots of conversations, can I underline lots of conversations, they said yeah. When they fully understood the definition of those 6 domains, they said, sure, that matches what we want. Absolutely, we can use that language. So our next adventure then was to try to figure out what to do with the KSAs. Remember, employee eval tools are about measuring, right? How are we going to measure this? Goes back to that measurement thing again. So we had to make a few modifications, like adding the term customer, even to the domain definitions, even to those KSAs, or to that language, let alone the KSAs. You get down into the KSAs, we didn't know what to do with them on this team. We really didn't. You can't deal with hundreds of KSAs on an employee eval tool, right? Every manager in the place would kill us. All right? So we started by doing a thematic analysis. We just went through all the domains and just highlighted words looking for patterns to say how would we measure that larger definition of that domain. It didn't work. We gave it a really good try, but it didn't work. We couldn't come up with adequate measurements that way. So we're back right now. This is still an active project. We are back right now looking at individual KSAs and saying which ones are the most important or the most universally held across disciplines. I don't know where it's going to wind up. I really don't. We're going to try it out, but there is still a lot more work to do on this project. So moving forward, there will be a lot more conversations. We need to get up close and personal, and those are kind of the phrases that people are using, getting up close and personal with CUSIN to make sure that we know what it's going to do for us and how would we use it in our settings. We have a lot of teachers, educators, leadership who are still at the point of CUSIN, yeah, that's the thing they do in college now, right? So we're still way back on a learning curve for them. And then we still believe that we need to be able to share our thoughts and feelings collectively with each other, conferences all the way to publishing, et cetera, and we need to find some grant funding. Because we really believe that collective thought is going to be extremely important as practice moves forward with CUSIN, because we can't afford this. We can't afford to all be going in different directions and making our own path. We have to figure out how to go that path together. So we still have about a half hour left of this. Yeah, about a half hour. I want to use at least 15 minutes of that for some collective thinking. You are a group of extremely bright people, or your work partners and or life partners wouldn't have paid for you to come to a conference. All right, so I want to get some benefit out of your collective thinking. You picked up a couple of handouts. One has the PowerPoint presentation in it, but towards the end of that thick packet are all of the graduate and the undergraduate KSAs printed straight off of CUSIN. I didn't modify them. They're right off the website. But your packet's large because I want you to engage in looking at some KSAs today. If you are in academia, we need your advice. We in practice need your advice to say, where would you go first? If knowing where you're at now in academia and knowing how far behind we are in practice, what would your advice be to us? Where should we attack first? And if you're in practice, where do you think we should step first collectively? So both sides, most of you in here are academia, but there's a good probably third of you that are in practice. We need to figure out what that first collective step is. ProMedic has taken a few steps with some encouragement. We've kind of started to walk down some of these paths, but we realize that we think we're pretty smart people ourselves, but we're not brilliant enough to try to figure this out for the whole nation or for the whole world, right? So we need to have some collective thought. So on the very back of your thick packet, this is what education in practice looks like. These are all of the elements. This is out of our NPD, which is the Nursing Professional Development Model. These are all of the midpoints of that model to say these are all the places that practice educators focus. These are all the types of work that we do. For those of you who aren't familiar with the NPD term, staff development, it's a term you know, right? These are all the different work elements or work parts that your staff development educators in your hospitals and all types of practice environments do. I just would like for you to pick one or two of these. I've given you example out of the CE one. I'm going to ask you to pick one or two of these work elements from your paper. I want you to collectively work with your neighbor, 2 or 3 people together for about 15 minutes or so, maybe 10 minutes. Where would you start? What KSAs, what domains? I've given you a place for all the 6 domains on your worksheet. Pick 1 or 2 of these work elements. Look at a domain and figure out which KSAs you'd start with. And then by taking where you chose to start, I can put together collectively. Now our goal is, we believe you're mostly academia. We want to do the same thing and get mostly a group that is practice. And then we want to go to mostly a group like the Ohio Executive Group from a leadership perspective. We'd like to take all 3 and actually see if we can do some trending across where all 3 of those major groups say that we should start our focus. So I've given you an example here. If you chose the work element of continuing education, under patient-centered, what KSA would be your priority? All right, and I picked one. And then I gave the rationale why I picked that. Okay? And what would be my second priority? Well, I think this KSA would be the second under patient-centered if I was looking at continuing education and practice under how to CUSINize it. Now, I said it can't be done in 20 minutes. I'm giving you less than 20 minutes. But you're way ahead of us on the curve, okay? I'm counting on that. You're way ahead of us on the curve. So on your worksheet, I've given you a spot to look at all 6 domains. If you have time, I'd love to have your thoughts around all 6 domains. I don't think that's totally reasonable, but you might be more comfortable with patient-centered or safety or quality. So pick the domains that you're most comfortable with. I'm looking for your recommendation on what KSAs belong in practice first. And the other piece of info that if you have one of those aha moments that you go, well, I believe that KSA is really important, but I wouldn't know how to do it because the verb doesn't fit, I'd love to have you write that down. So on the bottom of each of the 2 pages, so we have 4 total pages, on the bottom of the 2nd and 4th page, I've given you a little writing box for teaching strategy you want us to consider using, aha moments that you say aren't going to work, you realize that it's not going to match. So before I turn you loose, is there any questions about what I'm actually asking you to do? You want me to go over it one more time? Okay, start talking. Give me some great collective thought. I'm going to pull you back in about 15 minutes. Okay, I think we're going to pull back. I hear lots of excellent conversations, and it can't be done in 15, can it? Do you feel like you want a 4-hour block right now? That's what my educators kept saying. They literally went in and barricaded the door and said, you're not allowed to come in and interrupt us because we're on a roll. Leave us alone. We're on a roll. Leave us alone. So I love the energy in the room. I'm super thrilled with it. But I would like to do a little bit of popcorn right now. Tell me some of your aha moments. And what I want to do is, that's why you got it in 2 separate handouts. I'm an educator. I love to kill trees, right? I want your writing back. And so I've got a black little box up here that I want you to leave your thoughts with me. I will tally them, and if you want your information, if you want a summary of all of this, you can either put it on your sheet, or I've got many of you signed in. Thank you. I now have your best information. There's a pink clipboard up here that if you want to be part of, we're trying to create like an email network so that we can keep this energy going and have some of these conversations and bounce them off of people who are kind of at the same point we are. So sign up on the pink, drop your business card in the black box, drop your paperwork in the black box if you want to be connected with what we're trying to pull together here. So, but shy of me reading them all out loud, let's share a little bit. Where did you think we should start to prioritize? What were some of your aha moments? Who wants to share? Nobody wanted to stop. You all had energy going. So now just let's do some collective sharing. And there is a mic in the center. He's flagging me because they are recording this. So if you want to pop up and say something, I'll either repeat it in this mic or you can go to that mic. How's that? Oh, don't be shy. Come on. You're educators. You stand in front of people all the time. Nobody's going to be... Oh, we got one who's going to be brave. Yay. Thank you. It only takes one, right?
Yeah.
To start.
Okay, everybody start lining up behind me.
That's right. Come on. Come on.
Now, I'm Pat Patrician, and I work at University of Alabama at Birmingham. And my colleagues and I, my newly met colleagues, we were talking about what would be the most important... we decided on continuing education because you have to start somewhere with an introduction to CUSIN. So we thought CE programming would be the best. And then we prioritized the actual CUSIN competencies, and we figured that probably quality improvement would be the one to start with because so much of improvement work relies on measurement. Yep. And I teach a quality and safety course in our nursing admin master's program, and this is the part that all the students seem to struggle with is measurement. They think we're teaching them research, and we're really not. But I guess it is a component of improvement science, but they struggle with how to measure things beyond the one patient, beyond my urinary output or my I's and O's. But they don't understand aggregate measures. So we started with explaining the importance of variation and measurement in assessing quality of care because it's so critical to understanding CUSIN, period.
Absolutely.
And there's not a lot of work done on variation in nursing care like there is in variation in medical care, i.e. the Dartmouth Atlas and things like that. We don't know the extent of variation in nursing practice.
Right.
So that's as far as we got.
And variation is the enemy of quality.
Exactly.
So we have to do that. And someone is doing a concurrent session on quality improvement, and they've broken it down into 9 modules. I want to steal liberally. Whoever did that, I'm going to come to that session, and because we do need to teach. The bedside nurses aren't much more advanced in understanding variation and measurement and quality than your graduates. It's just kind of, I'm sorry, I don't remember your first name. Yeah, Bill. Bill was talking about some of the reactions of bedside nurses, and he said, quality is going to come talk to me. In a hospital setting, quality is a department, and they do it. It's them, it's not me. And one of the things that I want to highlight on the summary conversation is that CUSIN, the difference in that language variation, at least one of the things that we're questioning, since we all seem to have more questions than we have answers at this point, is CUSIN is an individual level competency. All the KSAs are at the individual level. And hospitals have reacted all the same elements of safety and quality and all the measures and people saying that you must do this and core measures and all those things. And we've reacted with organizational responses, not individual responses. And CUSIN is about the individual competency and response. And that's a major difference for us educators because, we want to stand up and tell them what quality is from a department perspective, right? Not about what my measurement and quality and the variance of my practice has to do with quality. And so that's a huge difference. It's subtle, but it's huge. Excellent, thank you. Who else has a popcorn to share?
Well, I'm not going to go back. But can you hear me? I'm not going to go back by the mic. But, from a practice perspective, when we talk about quality, and it kind of reminded me when you said that, quality was a department. Sometimes when that department comes to talk to you, we see that as a bad thing. And I know when I've done quality improvement projects, people don't want to talk to me because, first of all, they think I'm spying on them. They think that I don't know, what I'm trying to push them out of their job. But, so when we teach our students about quality and quality improvement, I think that's the beginning of changing that opinion that quality means that it's something bad.
That was one of the things we'd hoped, and just for the recording, she said, that people look at quality and people who come about the auditors and doing the quality, it's a bad thing. We were hoping that graphic where the rain is coming down, we were hoping that if we could help people understand that you have a quality competency just to be a bedside nurse, you have a quality competency and it's defined in this way. Then when the folks from quality come and talk to you, they're talking to you about those competencies, not about something you did wrong in your documentation. And that's really what it all boils down to is the quality folks become the auditing police. And it's all about what I didn't do in my documentation instead of what's my variance in my practice doing to the safety and quality of the care I'm delivering. And it's that difference that we have to help them translate. And that's where the KSAs can actually help build that instead of it always being the negative. We're hoping. That's not a declarative. We're not there yet. Who else has some thoughts? You guys had a lot of energy. You sure you don't want to share a little of it? Okay. Safety? Okay. I'm going to come get the mic. Wait 1 second. People can't hear you. And I'm going to try not to squeal by getting the two mics close to each other, okay? All right. I'm going to have you start over for me, will you? Don't be shy.
So I look at the your model, and one of the things is that it was very telling is the competency program. And how do you demonstrate that the nurse, the new nurse, have achieved these competencies? To me, safety is the main reason, and because we have too many negative outcomes, too many to count. And it's very serious, and we have to create this consciousness about safety, but it has to be at the individual level. So how do I do that? To me, I see this as a way that you have to become part of the culture. Safety has to become part of the way we do things here. So, for example, the VELO or in the competency, I put competency number 1 as identify best practices that promote patient, community, and provider safety. But I thought more like something that is more evident, such as after maybe a year, the nurse will join a UPC, a Unit Practice Council. You become part of the system. You join a group. So you identify with the group. And those values of the group become your values. So to me, it's something like that. Good. Looking at the second part, when they talk about describe evidence-based practice in responding to errors, we don't have to wait until errors happens. To me, we have to promote a culture of evidence, of but integrating evidence-based practice in everything we do. Grant rounds talk about AHRQ. Promote a contest or develop a tip sheet or something. So encourage that kind of, a value. It can be rewarded. It can be, research, evidence-based practice day in a hospital. And the units will compete, something like that. Excellent. And the last one, to me, is about analyze factors that promote a culture of safety. And that should be kind of like the talk of everybody. So, for example, if your nurse have a system where she or any provider will, for example, will be promoting not only safety in the way of safety and medical errors and that, but it can also be provided by culture safety, becoming aware of somebody else's culture. So your nurse went and obtained a CEU about, cultural identity and transgender issues. So, that could create a great portfolio.
Absolutely. My resident educators talk a lot about teaching the resident the evidence-based practice. And one of their favorite things is to give them evidence-based practice articles on residency and have them use that evidence against our model to tell where we are and aren't in tow with the evidence. So in giving them evidence, it helps them understand how evidence is used in their world. Anybody else want to pop up?
I just wanted to say that it seems like because we do specialize in nursing, that our specialization kind of hones into where we go with the KSAs.
Absolutely.
So right away, mine goes to communication.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I think everybody who has a specialization, that kind of speaks to you through those KSAs.
Right. It's just a matter of then how do we apply them.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I really appreciate your energy. I appreciate whatever written feedback you can provide me. I do have a black box up here. I'm going to slide down towards that end of the table for you to put your papers in so that I can collectively, tally them. I do have just a couple of summary thoughts, if you don't mind, and then I think Susan's got a couple of points. I need to step out so I can read this. So, in summary, CUSIN grew up in academia. It's time for us now to move it to practice, but we need to begin using it, and we need your help to get there. We have a lot of practice educators and leaders who aren't aware of it yet, and they need to learn. It's a framework that might not fit exactly into that evidence-based practice or practice-based evidence. We're not quite sure. We have a lot of questions. And just like academia had time to learn it and practice it and embed it into your world, we need to take the same time. If we do it too fast, we're liable to do it wrong. So we need to ask the questions and do it in a methodical way towards a common outpoint. And we do need to find some funding source, and we need to have a sharing network, and that's what I'm hoping to create by your cards. Chris and my business cards are up here. If you'd like our business cards, share yours back. We'll get a collective email group going, because the journey of 1,000 miles just starts with one step, and we've been encouraged all along, take the next step, take the next step, take the next step. So I'm encouraging you, join the walking group. Let's take the next step. Yes?
I have a question. In your health system, are you doing this in any areas that are long-term care that may be associated with your health system, or are you just doing acute care?
The educators so far that have engaged in this have been from the acute care. We have an education council that includes all of our long-term care and home care and all of those folks. So as soon as we are ready to take the next breath of it, yes, we will be engaging them, because that's part of the practice definition. We can't leave the continuum folks out of this. They have to come on the journey with us. They just have so fewer educational resources devoted in those areas. It's usually a manager that does 14 jobs all under one hat. So we wanted to at least figure out the first 2 or 3 steps and then invite them in.
Okay, we're out of time, and I just want to thank Barb for an inspiring presentation.
Thank you.